Get another dispatch from the front because I believe we have the one, the only, my brother, Pastor Stephen Furtick on the line.
What?
Yeah.
Pastor Stephen, we're so glad to have you.
Hey.
How are you doing today?
What's up? Oh, it's a good day.
It's music to my
I
ears
wish
to hear
you were
your
here
voice.
with me. I'm on the porch right now, and you could be sitting in this rocking chair next to me, but you're not, are you? You're in the trenches. You're declaring war. You're doing important things.
We are in a very military-themed environment. I don't know if you've popped on the YouTube at all yet.
The YouTube.
Yeah, you were talking about brass knuckles that you didn't mail and paperweights that you used as a sort of a well, actually, I have a whole box of stuff from you.
Okay, so Pastor Jensen Franklin texted me this morning, and he was like, hey, I was pretty scared to open your package with the grenade in it because of all these bombs that have been getting mailed around the country this week. And I was like, yeah, that was not great timing.
How about that timing? Yeah, that didn't cross my mind, but you really missed God on that one.
And then another church called us, and they said that they routinely X-ray all packages that come for the pastor, and they were concerned when they saw a grenade inside of a package that with my name on it. So that was really funny.
How about the fact that my team didn't do any of that? They just gave me the grenade. And
Here you go, Pastor Stephen.
Jensen Franklin. You're going to do the whole Jensen Franklin thing again in his voice. Let's go.
Oh, I can't
Jensen
do
Franklin
that.
said what?
Oh, my God.
Yeah, we're going to do it.
I want to hear you do it.
Well, this is what the people want on YouTube. They know I can do it. I'm from the South. They want you to do it.
I can't do a Southern accent. It would just butcher it.
No? Jenny, help me out. Do you think your husband should step out of his comfort zone? And
Yes.
Oh, man.
Yes, I do.
Pastor Jensen.
You got this.
Oh, man. I can't do it. I don't even know where to begin. I really can't do a Southern accent. I can't sing.
I'm going to ask you again at the end of this call, and we're going to.
I'll give it some.
Muster it up.
I'll give it some thinking. But hey, thanks for taking some time. You're on the porch. You're.
Yeah, I am.
Everybody in the world knows who you are and follows your ministry. Obviously, everybody jumping on now knows Elevation Church and the worship music and the books and honestly a big part of what gave us the idea for doing this today was your Crash the Chatterbox thing you did with the release day because really releasing a book kind of sucks, doesn't it? That day's just lame.
Because you wish that you could sit and read it with people and see if they actually like it or connect with it, and you send it out like you're sending your kid to college and
they
don't
get
call
to go
with them and you don't know how they're doing. They don't
write.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're exactly.
Yeah, it's a smart way to do it. Just talk to some friends online and let the day pass.
When I saw you doing that, I was like, that's brilliant because it just gives you something to do a little bit and until you hear somebody whether they liked it or not. So, but I wanted to say
I don't know how many people have the book yet though, bro, because like one thing I don't know if they're prepared for. I mean, you always write from a true place, an emotional place, but the way that you open this book, it was actually kind of shocking to me, like the way you describe your own battles. And I know you as such number one, you're a peaceful person, and I know you have your own angst, and I know you're imperfect, but you're such a positive person in my life. I thought it was really surprising in a good way how you just went in from the very beginning.
Just sweaty, sweaty in bed.
Yeah, what you battle with. I thought that was so gripping and.
Right.
So generous of you to start the book by inviting us in like that. Again, I don't know how many people listening have read it yet, but I think they're going to be surprised. Was that hard? Was that vulnerable for you?
I told Jenny this morning, I said, maybe we made a mistake and maybe it's not too late to call it off.
I was like, oh, do you have writer's remorse?
A little bit.
Really? Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
But at the end of the day,
out there now,
it was like, well, maybe I'm not the only one. If I have to go through crap like this, if we have to deal with this, maybe there's someone else who's waking up at 2 a.m. drenched in sweat and afraid of a sermon they're about to preach or whatever.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How do you relate to that with the angst and the turmoil? And is it more nighttime or is it more daytime?
Nighttime. I related to it when I started reading that you had written about this. I thought, number one, I'm grateful that someone like you who exemplifies a very positive version of faith. You're not some narcissistic, what would I call it? Someone who dwells in the muck of human emotion and glorifies it and dramatize this struggle. You know, you've been through a lot in life, and yet you maintain a real optimism. Like, you're such a joy to be around. You and Jenny are delightful people. So that being said, to see you juxtapose that with the dark side of what you fight through to get there, I thought was really not only refreshing, but constructive. And it opens up a realm for people to go, oh, so I can struggle with this. I can struggle with selfishness, but still not identify as a selfish person. Like, that was the beautiful paradox of how I think you've approached this book. I don't know. I really find it an interesting balance, maybe more so than anything that you've written so far. I thought it was really eye-opening.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I want to make sure, you know, while I have you here on the show today, and I'm so grateful that I have the chance to do this. But you know, the seeds for this book began in a conversation we had on the 1-year anniversary of Lenya going to heaven, and I've told you before that day was a little bit of closure for me on the journey of grief. It took Jenny a little longer. What was it, another month for you? Or
Yeah, it was like more towards January.
she didn't feel the same way I did. We were mostly synced up in our rhythms of grief for that first year. But then that 1 year mark, I remember it was like a turning over of a stone. And it was like, okay, I felt we've done Valentine's Day, Lenya's birthday, Christmas. We've done all the days. And then I looked forward till we go to heaven. And it was like, all we have to do is do that again and again and again.
Right.
At least there's not surprises. And, you know, maybe the 10-year will be horrible, but at least I know what that year looks like, the rhythms of it. And I remember telling you that on the phone. And then I began to describe a little bit of some of my different anxieties I was going through. And you said to me, you know, speaking from Jacob, you said you've struggled with God and with man and with grief, and you've prevailed. And then I don't even know if you remember saying this, but it was kind of offhanded. You said, now all you'll have to do is wrestle with yourself.
Dang.
And that was partially what was responsible for this kind of articulating this journey of kind of going inward a little bit on having to deal with some of my own demons. And so I want to thank you do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, no, thank you for telling me that. I mean, I love this about the way you've written this book, the way that you teach, and the way you address this topic. You break that down for me and what it means to wrestle with myself in a way that doesn't make me hate myself. You know, you talk in the book about which version of me do I want to be right now. You know, I don't just label things as a bad mood. I call it, you know, something like being hijacked or held hostage by the worst version of me. That kind of thinking is new to me because I lived in such a dichotomy for so long of being led by the Spirit or walking in the flesh. There was a lot of condemnation and guilt when my reactions were wrong. And sometimes the idea of declaring war on myself honestly was so exhausting because I almost felt like I was striving to be something that I wasn't. And the way that you bring me into this battle against myself in the book, it's a little bit different than that. It's a little bit like, that's not really you. You know, that's the construct of you, or that's the habits. You have a whole section about files and how the files were created, you know, thought patterns. And I think that's really necessary, Levi. There's so much talk about deliverance, good church word, or breakthrough that sometimes doesn't give us handles to know what we even mean by that, what steps we can take toward it. And so what I appreciate about this concept, I Declare War, is such a brass knuckles and hand grenades type title.
Right.
And it is an epic battle, and it is the most important battle we'll ever fight. But you break it down. Jenny, you know how he's always got 3 illustrations for every point. It's just a very fast-moving, rapid fire delivery in this book that's really similar to your personality. For those who don't know Levi, let me just say this, and Jenny can attest, this is what it's like to be around him, whether one-on-one or reading a book. And man, when I read the book, I feel just like I'm talking to you. It's like being inside your mind. All of
That's got to be scary.
All of the beauty of it. And yeah, it's a little scary.
You want some hand sanitizer.
It's a terrifying journey, but it's worth the thrill is worth the price of
admission. Did you say mouthwash?
So come on in.
She said mouthwash.
She's definitely, she's more she is more qualified to speak on the need for mouthwash in relationship to you than I am.
Well, she's
I'll
really,
leave it at
her
that.
biggest grievance has been this beard lately. I don't know how Holly felt about that when you were really long in the beard, but Jenny's mostly like, could you maybe not that as much?
It's just hard to navigate.
Yeah, my wife loves me for what's inside. I don't know what's wrong with your wife. You pray for her.
You can see on the screen, that's a pretty trimmed version. We have a photo there.
Jenny is
pretty
the
long
best, huh?
now.
Do you write about Jenny a lot in the book? I can't remember.
There's a good little bit about her. She comes up more in Swipe Right, obviously. Hey, here's a
Oh, yeah,
question. You
that's right.
spoke about strongholds and, we want deliverance, blah, blah, blah. And my theory is that for a lot of us, there may be a demon that is assigned to you, but he probably hasn't been doing anything lately for most people, for most of us. He doesn't care. He's
Right.
not seen us threat because we've done our own demonic work because we're dehydrated. You know what I mean? Like there's probably in a lot of situations, natural explanations, for the moodiness. It's like if your posture was better, if you got more than 3 hours of sleep, if you drank more than just Coke and, and Camel cigarettes, before we even begin to mess with this idea of, is there a demon messing with me today? What do you think about just the natural stuff that you're not doing that's just stupidity?
I think you're right. I think there are a lot of rhythms and patterns, and a lot of it you break down in the book. That's what I was trying to say, is that I love that you don't point to necessarily a spiritual answer for a practical problem, at the same time acknowledging that this is a war. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood. So it's possible that the origins of our dysfunction are demonic, that there is a satanic resistance to the mission that God wants us to accomplish. I think I'm pretty solid on that part of it, but the manifestation of it a lot of times isn't so ethereal or abstract. It really is a way of life. It really is a pattern of movement. And you're so right to say that sometimes we need more serotonin. Sometimes we need more sleep. At the same time that I'm waging war on myself, I also want to realize, I am not waging war on the part of me that is true. I'm waging war on the construct or the layers that have developed. And a lot of times I do have to talk myself down. It's so funny how when I'm in a bad place, when I don't have perspective, when I'm isolated, when I'm trying to fight alone, when I'm not, I don't know the line that you used in the book. What's the line that you had about isolation? I know you remember it.
Isolation.
That's a great line, Levi.
About when
isolation.
Oh yeah, it's basically that you can overcome self-imposed isolation if you learn to think right so you can live right.
Okay, so the idea of connecting, isolation is your weakest state. And when you're isolated, you often don't have the perspective to come out of isolation because you're weakened. And then it creates a cycle. And a lot of these cycles, for me, they're not broken by just praying. They're not broken by just feeling guilty or even just recognizing the pattern. I need a new practice, something to interject. And so you went through a moment in the book where you were talking about what it's like to sit down and write, and your reading glasses that you put on, and the thoughts that are going through your head that you're not a writer and this isn't going to help anybody. And you break that pattern by speaking out loud. This book is going to help people. I've got my glasses on. Can't you see I'm a writer?
Screw you, devil.
To me, it's brilliant. Yeah, screw you, devil. I'm writing this book. And then you're off, and we're holding the book today. But I'm so glad that you are opening up a little bit of whatever you call it, the arsenal, I think you mentioned in the book, to show there are practical and tactical ways to fight this battle. It's not just about us groveling before God for strength. It is actually sometimes something very practical and very simple. And I think this book's going to be a little bit of the missing link for a lot of people, because I think a lot of people have gone on a 7-day fast, or they've asked everybody that they know to pray for them, and they've gone down front to the altar or whatever their version of that is. But they're maybe missing some of these practical strategies, and I'm glad that they're going to have them, and I'm glad that you share them from a very personal place in your own life. It's powerful, man.
Thank you so much.
So good.
The tension between, God's help and self-help, and I feel like maybe it was the church background I grew up in, but anything that smacked of self-help or anything that smacked of, practical, it was just automatically assumed to be carnal. And so, the spiritual answer is everything, and it's let go and let God. And I understand that you can get to the other side where it's like, oh, if I just think positive and stay hydrated, everything's going to be fine. Obviously, that's not the case. But I think that there's some simple everyday things that could bring a lot of people closer to where they want to be in life. Then we can approach God and worship and all of these things, having already done those things, of washed our face and, all the things. So here's a question. What are some rituals or some traditions? What are some things that if you see slip in your life, you automatically feel yourself, go into a darker place?
Yeah. So I got the opposite side of it came to me first. Like the way that I attack lethargy in my life is through generosity. And it seems like a weird connection, but I have found that usually I'm stuck in myself, which is basically the premise of your book. How do I get out of myself? I need to give something beyond myself. And it's funny how even giving away something that seems really small, I'll go through my closet a lot of times, or I'll do something that really brings no immediate benefit or visible benefit to me, or it could be a word of encouragement. It could be anything. But I've learned that a lot of times, rather than endlessly reflecting on the state that I'm in, giving something away kind of sends a signal to my soul, to my spirit. You're bigger than this, and God has what you need. It's that practical action, though, that reconnects me to the reality of what God has spoken. In those moments, I can't just go into my mantras. It doesn't work for me. I can't just necessarily confess over top of it. Is the practical action that kind of invites the truth back into my heart, allows the Holy Spirit to have a prominent voice in my life again. When I start to slip the most is when I can almost feel it happening from time to time, when I withdraw from expressing, whether it's my struggles to others or even celebrating my success, when I find myself cutting myself off from the people who actually love me and support me. And that's why I asked you about isolation. I know you must struggle with it too, as a leader, as a pastor. There's a sense that you always have to be together to be in front of people. And if you don't have the answers, you shouldn't speak. And a lot of times that's a trap, and you get caught up in endless questions, and it can really be a spiral. I found a lot of times I go into performance mode. I go into this version of myself that always has to be on. And if I can't be fully on, then I just withdraw, and I become weaker and weaker and weaker until finally I get desperate enough to reach out. So I found that I'm better when I'm actually expressing what's going on in my heart to others, to God in prayer, but I'm better if I'm expressing it. Usually when I start withdrawing and start staying in those thoughts, I can't solve the problems of the thoughts on the levels of the thoughts. I have to get out of the thoughts into the actions, or into the confession, or into the honesty and vulnerability to find healing.
Gosh. Now, as this intersects with you as a creator, because, you've written some of the most prolific worship songs of the last decade. We sang "Come to the Altar" as a team before we went out to church on Saturday, not on platform, which we also started our service with Echo, but backstage we sang "Oh Come to the Altar," just a handful of us a cappella to get ready, and it so shifted the atmosphere. And I was thinking about it walking to church, how that, I know the story of how you wrote that and all that. My question is, though, do you find the dark moments profitable for creative writing or new things, or is it when you've been brought out of the dark and you're back at the top swing that you start to see the brightness of those moments?
Now we're getting beyond this is the stuff that we talk about, not on the live broadcast. This would be like me and you just talking. I love it because it's acceptable to say that, God is light and in him there's no darkness, and that there's nothing good grows in the dark, and da 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 da. What a lot of times I find, though, that shadow effect of having to go through uncertainty in order to come to confidence. The uncertainty that I traveled through to get to the confidence is what makes the assertion or the declaration powerful. So it gives the weight to the confession that I did not arrive there through a clear path of certainty. And I don't know how God orchestrates that through our moods, our temperaments, our personalities. I've never been able to break down necessarily how much of my mental anguish or suffering or doubt is self-imposed. And I'm getting more and more frustrated the longer that I pastor. I'm getting more frustrated, maybe the longer that I'm just a believer. I'm getting less tolerant of the easy answer that preaches great but doesn't live well. And people are so quick to get to the conclusion, you know. A lot of times I like to talk about how doubt can be beneficial to your faith. And right there in the YouTube comments or Instagram live comments, if I said that, someone would respond, but James 1 says, let him not doubt, read the doubt. It's like a wave of the sea tossed and driven with the wind. I'm like, man, I know that verse too in King James English. I'm not talking about staying in a state of doubt where you deny the reality of God. I'm talking more about doubt in the sense of, you know, allowing God to change your questions and allowing God to sometimes probe you in ways that you weren't prepared for. I'm talking about living with a little bit of white space and, you know, God being found in the whisper with Elijah. Like, these are all biblical metaphors too. So to answer your question, I don't know if it comes creatively speaking or an insight or an encouragement. I don't know if it comes in the moments that are dark or after those moments. I've never been able to time it. I don't know the connection between the two, but I have learned to trust in those moments of uncertainty. And I know that God is not the author of confusion, but even in my confusion, I feel like there's something that God does in that wrestling, you know, which is so appropriate to talk about since you're releasing a book called Winning the Battle Within Yourself. Well, why does God allow us to struggle within ourselves? You know, that's where we find him. That's where faith is strengthened, is within that struggle. That's where our own idolatrous opinions are torn down and our dependence on ourselves is weakened so that we can trust in him. So I don't know how that works out. If you're writing a song, you know, after you've journeyed through something that feels like it's never going to end, but then you're able to write on the other side of it that God was with me, you know, every step. That has a weight to it that it would not have if I wrote it only on the sunny side. And I don't know how all of that works, but
because there's this like mentality of like a tortured genius. Like, okay, if I'm not tortured, I'm not creating. So, but then on the other side of it, there's that, you know, do the work perspective that says, hey, if and when inspiration comes, it's going to find me at my desk between these hours. You know what I mean? And I think there's a tension between manic behaviors that we feel like we're creative, or, you know, it kind of like almost like I get inspired when it's last minute. So do I procrastinate to get to the last minute on purpose so that pressure kicks in, or can I just show up and do the work? And eventually that would have happened either way.
Yeah. There's an indulgence in misery that almost seems justified. It's, you know, there's a lot of study on this, man. It's probably depending on who you're asking and what outcome they want, because I've read about people like Stephen King in certain genres, you know, who's a great Christian living author.
Sure.
Stephen King, you know, yeah.
It's like between A.W. Tozer and C.S. Lewis on most shelves at Lifeway.
Yeah, in the writings of Augustine were the predecessor to his works. But when you get into a creative mind with someone who maybe wouldn't say, well, I'm writing worship songs or I'm writing books about the Bible, the creative process may look much different. I do know this, and I want to take just a moment and get in the right frame of mind before I just answer that question. I know that the way that creativity happens in my personal experience, there is a cost attached to anything I've ever created. And sometimes that cost comes in the form of like endless revisions and self-doubt and scrutinizing myself, and the feeling of reading a chapter after you've written it, or hearing a song back and not even wanting to send it, or just all of the cringiness that comes with creativity, preaching a sermon and the part that you thought was great, and you register the blank expressions of people and you realize that it wasn't exciting to anybody but you. All of that is part of the price tag of creating. So what I do know is I don't think that the best way to be creative is to be in a state of incapacitated immaturity in life. And to have no habits, no disciplines.
If I don't
I do
suffer, it's
believe
not worth
that-
it, kind of a thing, like a monk, kind of like beating yourself with the whip thing. Yeah.
Or even what you described of like plunging yourself into a chaotic environment because it somehow feels more poetic. I don't believe in that. Obviously, I don't believe in that. And even if I did, it's not worth compromising a sense of balance in life to create something great. But what I know to be true is that when I come to something creative, or even when I come to my life with the answer rather than the question, typically what I arrive at isn't interesting, isn't helpful, isn't powerful. When I'm willing to live in a tension, and I'm not talking about suffering in life, and I'm not talking about bad things that happen, I'm talking about living within a tension of, and I'm sure this book was the same way for you, that you weren't writing because you had the answers. You were writing into a tension, into a battle, into a struggle within your own self. And then from that place, you connect more truly. So what I'm pretty convinced about after however many sermons I've preached or songs that I've been a part of writing or books, anything that I've done creatively comes from the question. And if I'm really engaging with the question and wrestling with the question, that's like wrestling with God. Oof. And what I come to is less of me and more of him. It's the wisdom that I didn't know that I needed that will flow in those moments. And if I start any other place than that, I come to some pretty predictable and boring and lifeless conclusions. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the wrestling. I think just like Jacob wrestled, and just like there are stages of failure and death that precede every resurrection, I think that's a part of the creative process too. And I don't like it. I'm not a fan of it because I like the way it feels, but what's on the other side is usually much more beautiful, significant, and lasting.
Gosh.
Amen.
Well, Pastor Stephen, thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy day to be with us. Your latest book's Unqualified. I hope everyone will pick that up. Of course, the brand new music is Hallelujah Here Below by Elevation Worship, which if you're not singing those songs in your church, you're just out of the will of God.
Such a good cross promoter. I mean, Jenny, he even puts a little condemnation on his promotion. It's like,
Jenny,
it's like the light in the darkness.
What would you like to
You
say
know?
to Holly Furtick?
Oh,
Through
Pastor
her
Stephen,
wife,
we love you.
husband.
But your wife, Holly, is one of my most favorite people in the whole world. And so we just
And
love
we
and
haven't
appreciate you
we
so
haven't
much.
announced it yet, but we did do an I Declare War batch of e-studies. They're going to be showing up on the e-studies online portal. What's that website? Do you know that offhand?
You know what? As of right now, they're exclusive. I'll have to when they're public, I would send you the link. But they can't get them right now unless they're on the EFAM.
But eventually, but people can join the EFAM, right?
They get yeah, but we're it's we're not here to talk about that.
You don't. Okay, so listen, if you join
Talk about
the
that.
Elevation Church online community, you can get access to a bunch of different e-studies, including eventually. I don't think they're out yet. The I Declare War ones we shot a while
They're
back.
not out yet. They'll be out soon. Only for people who know. Only for people who know the secret passcode. And I don't know the secret passcode right now, but I'm going to get it to you. I have one more question.
Yeah.
Have you decided to do the Jensen Franklin impersonation, or is that still off the table?
I have no game.
Let's read a little section from I Declare War in Jensen Franklin. I'm going to do it. Here we go. This is war. I woke up this morning to a worship song Alexa played for me on my Amazon Echo. I ate some oatmeal and drank black coffee while I read my Bible and prayed. Haven't been on Instagram. This is not good.
Love
is it?
like you've never
This is
been
awful.
hurt. That's amazing.
It's good.
Oh, Pastor Stephen, we love you.
Thankful for you.
Love
Thank
you
you for
back.
joining us.
You have the best day ever. Thanks for taking some time to be with us.
Okay, love you. See you soon.
All right, bye-bye. Hey, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you click subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the good things that are coming. Appreciate you taking the time to visit me here on YouTube. Have a great day.